Okay. Let's see if I'm coming back here. The Donald Trump painting. Everybody love that. Good times. Okay. I think we're back on. Oh, hey, Alex. I don't know why I can't get you to. Oh, here we go. Go live with Alex. Yeah, I will. Let's hope this connects. Hey, what's up, dude? How's it
What's
going?
happening?
Fucking Park Slope internet connection issues.
Same here.
Yeah. Are you still in the slope?
I'm in the slope.
Awesome. Me too. 17th Street and 4th Avenue. Well, it's sort of not the slope.
Yeah, you're kind of south slope.
Yeah, it's called Greenwood Heights now. Thank you.
Yeah, technically, where I am is now called Gowanus.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, Gowanus is a ever-growing place, so
It's the place to be. But
it's
yeah,
a hot
it's
spot.
weird. I don't remember the internet connections being so bad before the pandemic. I think because everybody's home and.
Like when I have to do schooling with my daughter in the morning, because everybody's on from like 9 to 10.
Right.
It's impossible. It's like ridiculous.
Okay.
So speaking of pandemics, hey Alex, how you doing, man?
All right, I'm hanging in there. I'm just getting used to this new way of life. It's a little bit surreal.
Yeah.
But
Move the camera a little bit. You're out
sorry.
of frame a little bit. Yeah, no, don't worry about it, man.
Give me one sec.
Yeah,
I'm still getting used to this whole this whole thing.
Fucking jamming, dude. What's up? See that guitar?
Oh yeah. I was just working on some stuff right before this.
I got this bad boy, 1964 Gibson Dove acoustic.
Oh, cool. That's a beauty.
Yeah. Oh, it was a gift from my father-in-law. Yeah. So you've been working on some stuff. You just jamming.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like I've got this very full schedule since this all started. So I'm getting hired for studio projects. Some of it's nothing like what you think I play by different artists. So I've got several studio for hire projects that I'm working on. I've been doing these quarantine jams. The ones that are getting the most attention are the ones with Charlie Benante and Ra from Suicidal Tendencies, Charlie from Anthrax, but we've been doing Rush. And
I've seen it.
Yeah, those videos have been going semi-viral. That's kind of a bad choice of words right now. But it's kind of become a thing. So those, and there's been a few other. I did another one that involved Brian May, which was really kind of cool and crazy.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, there's a bunch. There's more coming up. So it's like I'm going back and forth between quarantine videos and studio for hire stuff, and I'm working on some other stuff that but it's interesting. So I'm still busy, but just without the travel. I'm trying to play guitars that I haven't played in a while. This one is it's like a 90s Les Paul.
Beautiful.
Signed by Roger Daltrey.
Oh, sick.
Yeah.
You know what I love about this whole quarantine thing is that everybody's left-handed now in videos.
Oh, is that right? Yeah, I've been asked about that. It's like, are you left-handed? And it's like, no,
I am. I'm just like, oh, everybody.
And you really, so you're showing up.
Yeah, so I'm ready.
Side up.
I'm just like,
that's
I can
cool.
sell my guitars now.
Right.
Somebody will buy them. Oh man, so how many, like, you guys were in Europe when this broke out, right?
Yeah, it was so crazy. So we were very lucky because we were able to do all the shows except for 2, which, considering we had over 24 shows, very close to 30 shows, I believe, in just over a month. So it was a jam-packed tour, and we made it all the way till the last show, which was in Hanover, Germany, and that one got canceled. So the night we had the night of our last show ended up being Brussels, Belgium, and it was the last night of concerts in Brussels. And we had been dodging these bullets because we had played Zurich, and they had canceled concerts like 48 hours later. We'd had one other cancellation in Milan, Italy, where that was where things started to get really bad. But even then, it was we didn't get any word of cancellation until like 2 days before. But other than those two shows, we were able to finish the tour. But then, as soon as that second to last show happened, which ended up being the last show, then suddenly, I'm getting my phone's blowing up. They're saying nobody can fly into the United States, and be careful, you may get quarantined at Andrews Air Force Base. Like, nobody knew what was going on. So suddenly, all hell broke loose. Luckily, we all managed to catch our flights and get back safely. I had no health issues, but some of the people on the tour did. I think a disproportionate amount of people who flew to San Francisco ended up having health problems. So I think it might have been something with their flight to San Francisco, but who knows?
Right. Yeah. Well, San Francisco had a pretty big outbreak at that point, but Chuck Billy got really sick, right?
He got very sick. His wife Tiffany, who was our production manager, they were both sick. Our bass player Steve DiGiorgio, they all ended up testing positive, and I hadn't known this at the time, but a couple of the guys, Rob and Damon from Death Angel, were sick as well. But then Will from Death Angel had it the worst of all, and he was
he was in the hospital, right? He
hospital,
was
ICU, ventilator, the whole thing. It's amazing that he pulled through that.
Jesus Christ, man, that's so fucking scary. I think it's amazing that everybody didn't get it. It's like it's so crazy that you guys would all you guys weren't all on the same bus, but you weren't. I mean, you're thinking that they got it in San Francisco. They didn't get it in Europe.
I think it's possible. I mean, it's possible some of them got it in Europe, because I've just from what the Death Angel guys have said recently in the press and news, they weren't feeling good while we were still on tour. I didn't even know that. I would not have known that. The rest of us were fine, but it just seems like after that flight, that's when Chuck and Tiffany got sick. That's when Steve got sick. That's when other people on that flight and on that routing got sick. So
right, yeah,
I think it's possible, but it's just one of those things. Who knows?
Yeah, and it's neither here nor there. Nobody knows anything.
It's such a strange thing. And I had a cold, but it just felt like a very normal cold. No fever, no dry. So it didn't match any of those symptoms. So I just thought, okay, this is just a normal. But it's who knows? Could that have been my asymptomatic version of the thing?
Yeah,
maybe.
We won't know until we can get an antibody test, and know if we had it. But neither here nor there. I'm here to interview you. You're one of my favorite guitar players of all time.
Thank you.
I saw Testament the first time on the New World Order tour, long time ago at Sundance on Long Island. This is my acrylic, which you signed a couple of years ago. My Testament, the Legacy acrylic painted jacket, which I had done in 1987. Cool. Yeah, you're the freshest autograph on it. So, but
amazing.
Yeah, I was Testament was my favorite band back then, and it was I chose you guys over Metallica and Exodus and Slayer and everybody. So I really was drawn to the sort of odd. The guitar solos always stuck out to me in the band. To me, it was far and above a lot of the other shit that was going on. It was like you could sing, just like Kirk Hammett, honestly, and you guys both took lessons from Joe Satriani. You could sing your solos, which is really fucking weird for a thrash band. It's like that's that's cool. It was less of a shred solo and more of a part to a song that was melodic and felt cool. And it like I wanted to ask you, so you grew up in Berkeley, California, right?
Yeah, born and raised.
Yeah. Okay. And so you started playing guitar at an early age, like 9, 10?
10 years old.
Okay. And so then when did you get like really serious about it? Because you joined Testament when you were like 15 or 16, right?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of crazy like how fast it came together. So just to go back to your earlier comments, thank you. And I was really coming from a place, to be honest, I was really like more of a, I guess you could say power metal guitarist. Or where I was coming from at that time, it was Ozzy with Randy Rhoads, Scorpions with Uli, Michael Schenker with MSG and UF. So I was kind of coming from this power metal, one guitar place. Dio with Vivian Campbell. But most of the more technical players at that time, you were supposed to join a glam band, right?
Yeah.
And even
not unlike the way they kind of pushed Yngwie in that direction, like.
Well, even Ozzy,
Yeah.
When Ultimate Sin came, if you look at those,
There's no guitar
videos.
The only guitars on the Ultimate Sin song is the fucking guitar solo. It's like all keyboards.
Yeah. But the thing is, I liked, so I kind of envisioned playing stuff more like Ozzy, UFO, Scorpions. But I liked going to these shows. So like Exodus was playing locally, and Legacy at the time, which would become Testament.
Right.
And I liked those shows better, and I didn't want to have to get glammed up and all that stuff. So it was kind of like, okay, let's just try playing. I was just already starting to think about playing faster, heavier music and make it work. And then I heard Testament, Legacy needed a guitar player. And at that time I was 16. So it was kind of nuts because I'd only been playing since I was 10. And I'd really only been playing lead guitar since I was around 12 or maybe 13. And I heard Van Halen. And then I was like, okay, I need to be I don't just want to be Paul Stanley. I want to be this guy.
Were you taking lessons that whole time? Or like at what point did you meet Joe Satriani and start taking lessons with him? Like,
I started with lessons with him when I was 14.
Okay.
And that lasted about 2 years, right up until the time I was doing my first shows with Testament. And he was starting to get busy with his, he didn't have his record deal out, but he had done one like indie instrumental EP. And he was just, I think, he really wanted to make a go of just putting, it was obviously a smart move. Just, he was, shedding his teaching schedule and just putting more time into getting his albums together. But I had a couple other local players before that. Some of them were actually, they'd been Satriani students.
Okay.
And they all told me, don't study with him, because I think he had put them in their place. These were guys who were sort of like the stars in their neighborhoods. And the band, Joe, just took no BS. It was just, he didn't care how big a deal you were in your neighborhood. You were just, when you were in that room with him, okay, what have you got? What do you?
Yeah.
And okay, you can play some, you can do some fast hammer-ons, but how musical are you? And he was really trying to make musicians out of people, which was great.
Was he a big influence? You're an incredibly versatile guitar player, and you've done so many. Like you literally have done songs in every style I can think of, and was he an influence early on for that sort of exploration into?
Yeah, I mean, definitely as far as sort of being an all-around guitar player. I mean, there's different types of guitar players, and if you're if you're focused more on one specific style, that's fine. And there's I know that there's some people that might prefer that. But yeah, I mean, I always listened to. I had broad listening tastes, and Joe was somebody I could bring in. An Yngwie, the new Yngwie record, and he could sort of show me where it was coming from, the scales and modes, and
how much did he hate that?
Well, he was getting. I think he was getting that all the time.
Yeah.
So he very gently just said, "Listen, check him out, but don't get too caught up in one guy, because you end up with guys, who end up, really trying to mimic other players, and it becomes really obvious." So
right.
At that time, like before that, for a few years, then Stevie Ray Vaughan was popular, and he had guys coming in with like the Stevie Ray Vaughan Strat and the hat and all these like.
Yeah, you could do anything you want. You're never gonna get that tone.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, learn it, but don't try to be a clone of anybody. And I thought that that was really good advice. But I could also, I also would bring in stuff like Jeff Beck, Blow by Blow,
cool,
which he knew inside and out, and like any kind of music. John Mclaughlin, like he was, and he was sort of all around musician, and like to him there was no reason you shouldn't know that stuff, even if the music you're playing is more cutting edge and more like extreme metal. We didn't even have the term extreme metal at the time, but it was like there's no sure, play that, but don't ignore this. Right.
That's cool. I mean, that's that's a great lesson for anybody, especially for a kid 14, 15, 16 who's probably, a lot of them had tunnel vision for, I'm going to play metal, especially the Eddie Van Halen thing. I mean, there were so many Eddie Van Halen clones at that time in the 80s. It's like, I'm sure it got a little boring after a while to seeing another guy get up there and recreate Eruption.
Also nobody was doing it right, really.
Well, there's that too,
and not like, I'm not saying I could either. I mean, only in like recent years I've felt like I've been able to dive, because it's so deep, the music, his level of playing is just so intense. Only after like years and years of experience I feel like I can go back to it and sort of pick up on it on a deeper level. But I would learn like bits and pieces here, but that was, and the people I heard who tried to do it mostly didn't catch on to a lot of what was so great about it, which was like the timing and the attitude and the singing quality, and it was just in a way, like, even though he was the most exposed player, and deservedly so, he was almost underrated for some of the things he did well. Yeah. Because the stuff that got all the attention just sucked up all the oxygen out of the room.
I'm not the biggest Eric Clapton fan, but I felt the same way about him. Like the nuances of his timing were like stuff that like a normal person wouldn't pick up. Right. It's like, it's really super interesting. Or a guy like Steve Howe, who who I would liken to you in a lot of ways. Like, you can see the Yes posters behind on my wall here, but in that he played so many different styles. Of course, he would play 15 different styles in one song, which is fucking crazy. But yeah, like that was it's interesting that you like talk about like the concentrating on these sort of like nuances of these players. And like, did you find yourself wanting to like?
Hey, can I say hi to someone?
Yeah, who? Bumblefoot?
Speaking of great guitar players, Mr. Bumblefoot.
Dude, that guy's incredible. Oh my god.
Yeah, just mad scientist.
It's insane watching him. Like they I forget who he was playing with, but he like at soundcheck, it's like he's like a fucking human jukebox. And he's just playing and you're just like, oh my god, what the fuck?
And singing too.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
He's got like this Freddie Mercury range voice.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Like, what the fuck?
All right. Well, so you're how old?
Good to have you aboard, man.
When the Legacy comes out, How old are you at that point?
Yeah, well, so I was, like I said, I was 16 when I joined the band, and within 2 years, we were recording and touring. So Legacy comes out, and I'm 18 years old.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And then you just go on the road, and that's it. You finish high school, and you're off.
Yeah. I mean, I was a September baby, so I was actually like one of the youngest people in my class. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a whole study on this about people born in the fall, how they end up.
What is it? Like, what's the study? I'm interested in this because I was younger by a year than everybody else because I was born in December.
Me too. So it's the same. It's the same thing. It's in a book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. He has a whole chapter on that.
Interesting.
And it's really interesting, and it's very relatable. You always felt a little bit, behind everybody. Well, because that's like a year of development that you haven't had. But I was happy about it because by the time, a lot of I had friends who were older that were still in high school because they were they were in the next grade,
right?
Which I wasn't too old for that, but I was already on the road and doing our thing. And then we hit the road with I think the first tour was with Anthrax. So,
wow,
what a small world as I'm making these Rush videos with Charlie. But yeah, that was Anthrax, Overkill on that tour. We went to Europe. We played with it's a lot of the same bands that we play with now. Megadeth, although Megadeth I remember the first time with them was in Europe, and I think maybe that was the second record. But right away it started. It was like, okay, every year record tour, boom.
I mean, were you? I know your parents are both academics.
Yes.
Were they disappointed that you weren't going to go to college immediately, or were they go for it?
It was it was World War III basically.
But you started making I mean, I'm sure the money wasn't great. You were playing small clubs, but were you able to eke out a living where you could get your own apartment and like you could move out and do your own thing? And
it took a couple years.
Yeah.
I've like many, when you're living the dream, quote unquote, you imagine this moment where you put pen to paper and suddenly you can afford an apartment. For a lot of us, it didn't happen that way.
Right.
But a few years went by and you just notice, oh, you know what? Okay, we can sort of start putting money away and get an apartment. Well, we're on a bus now. We're not in a van. So we moved up, but it was slow and gradual. And I think my parents, they finally started to accept it when we supported Judas Priest at the Oakland Coliseum. And
they could come see you.
And they saw us at an arena. Yeah.
I've heard that story before. That's totally true. That's awesome. I mean, like you did eventually go back you did eventually go to college.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get into that in a little bit, but I want to continue on a timeline level.
Yeah.
So back in the studio, New World Order, you guys now you have like videos.
The New Order.
The New Order.
That's all right.
And that's when I saw you, and that was in a 300 capacity club where my friend actually just reminded me it was with Stone, a band from Finland, and a band called INC from Connecticut, who are actually still around. And you guys were just fucking amazing. It was like mind-bogglingly incredible. And I was finally old enough to go see you, which was freaking cool as shit. But you guys were like on Headbangers Ball and like, you just kept leveling up. And when you get to practice what you preach, there was a little bit of a change in sound. Was that like, what was the vibe with all that? Like, were you guys just like, things got a little bit slower, shall we say? It wasn't like the all-out thrash. Were you guys? Was the band trying to appeal to more people, or was it just a natural progression?
I think it was just a natural progression because we'd already done 2 albums. At that point, it just didn't really make sense to try to copy the earlier records.
Right.
We were working with different people in the studio. We were at a different studio from the first two records. And I think also we weren't happy. It's strange because the second record, those are some of our favorite songs. Those are some of the favorite fan songs. To this day, we probably play more songs off of the New Order than any other record. But we really weren't happy with how it sounded.
Okay.
And I don't want to go into all the details, but I do remember that there were these tiny little microphones that were supposed to be all the rage, and this is going to be the next thing. You guys don't want to be stuck in the past, right? This is the future. And we were just those are tiny microphones. Are you sure?
You never want to be the experiment. You never want to be the experiment. Like, please just fucking mic it up.
Yeah, and it took a long time. I mean, we at that point, we're still so new and so green, and nobody in our band had the confidence of like a Lars or somebody. We were just like, oh, okay, and we didn't like the sound of it, even though we loved the music. So I think we just wanted to get away from that and do something completely different.
Right. Cool. Awesome. And then Souls of Black is next, right?
Yeah.
And the band just continued on a trajectory that was kind of kept going up. And, like I know you guys sold quite a bit of records back then, like 400,000 or something like that, if I remember correctly. And that was like a lot for back then for a thrash band. It's like kind of crazy. But I guess you guys were all over MTV, and there's a lot of support. What led you to leave the band in '92?
How much time do you have?
We got a half an hour, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. I just I'm interested because I've read lots of different things. And I know that you've come out publicly and said that it's not because I wanted to write more melodic songs. Obviously, at that point, grunge had hit, so things were kind of changing in the metal world.
Right.
The underground metal world, I think, still stayed strong for a long time.
Yeah. Well, okay. It was a lot. It was a lot of things.
Okay.
In as few words as also I've talked about it so much.
Yeah, it's fine. I get it.
I wrote. No, it's not hard to find. I even wrote a memoir a few years ago.
Right. Well, you can promote that. Geek to Guitar
Hero. Yeah. And there I talk about it in probably way too much detail. I probably wouldn't do that now. But it was very therapeutic to talk. Basically, the band was malfunctioning at that point. Everybody. It was. I'm not going to point fingers. We obviously years later worked through it, and most of us anyway, and it's water under the bridge. And I feel like now it's hard to imagine us not being friends, even if somebody decided not to play in the band at that time. Though at that time, you're at that age. It was a really, really difficult decision and a difficult thing to go through. But I hadn't really lived outside of that pressure cooker and that whole circle. And I wanted to experience the rest of the world. I wanted to experience people other than just the scene of the band and the hangers-on. And I wanted to experience music outside. So I think it would have happened with me no matter what. I don't know if it would have happened as early as it did if it weren't for the level of dysfunction. But it wasn't just me. I mean, within weeks, the drummer Louis was gone. Within a year, the bass player was gone. Like everybody was gone. So it's certainly and those things had nothing to do with me. And then the rest of the lineups they would get, nobody would stay in the band. So it was just, it was like it was a behind the music era of the band.
Right, gotcha. Yeah,
they had everything. It fell all apart, and they got it back together.
Yeah, and here's the reunion tour. It's so then right after you left, though, you went and played with Sabotage, right?
Yeah, that was unexpected. That came up. I'm proud. Yeah, I'm proud of doing the work with them. I love their early music. But yeah, it was really because of this tragic accident that they had experienced, losing Chris Oliva, a great guitar player. At first I just thought this probably isn't a good idea, because I think at that point, this is like 2 years later, this is like 94, I think. And we'd been on the road with them. And I think at that point, like, there's craziness in any of these bands. You would have found, like, every one of these bands was a little bit like a reality show at that time. I'm not saying just us. Megadeth, let's not even get started on what a reality show they were back then. But Sabotage too. And so my attitude was, I love you guys. I'm a fan of I traded the tape in high school. I'm so honored. I don't think it's a good idea, because I just got out of this. It's like I just got out of a marriage.
Right.
And I don't think I'm ready to walk down the aisle.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, so it was 2 years between quitting Testament and Sabotage, and then you kind of, like, I guess you went back to school in '98. What were you?
Yeah, great guy who's the founder of the band and the brother of Chris Oliva. Originally this was being done through their management and our management. And John Oliva just called me personally and just said, "Listen, man, I know my brother, and I know this album is almost done. We just need solos. And I know the only guy my brother would want playing these solos is you."
That's an honor.
Yeah,
that's great.
So it's like, okay, I can't say no to that. So, okay, I'll do the record. And then I stuck around. I just, and I wasn't just going to do the record. I figured, okay, I'm going to do the album cycle and see how it goes. And I had this vision of going back to the early stuff of theirs that I really liked.
Right.
Like the Sirens and all that stuff. But then they came up with, they started working with Paul O'Neill, may he rest in peace. And he was sort of steering them in a different direction, which in a way that was very successful. It ended up starting the Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Yeah, I've heard that whole story. It's a crazy story.
Yeah, and then so that was like, that blew up. And then by the time that started blowing up, I was in New York. I'd already gone to school. I got my music degree, and I was sort of a guitarist for hire. And somehow I was keeping a really low profile too. But
were you just were you giving lessons? Like, what were you doing? Like,
Yeah, I was playing for. I was doing sessions. I was doing live gigs with artists you might not have heard of. Sometimes there was this folk singer I was playing with, but she would have like the bass player from Suzanne Vega, or the keyboardist for the Manhattan Transfer, like all these like heavyweight session players. One time it was the bassist from Paul Simon, Bakiti Kumelo.
Yeah.
So it was great. I was kind of getting this experience doing different music where you're just backing somebody else up. And there were some other. I had already started working on my trio, and that was my passion project at the time. And then somehow the management of Trans-Siberian Orchestra, which was David Krebs, who's like this legendary figure. I don't know how he found out I was in New York. Maybe he saw it listing and brought me into the office, gave me the whole lowdown that TSO is going to be 2 tours, and it's going to be, this big thing, and we think you should play guitar.
It seems like it's a
crazy
relatively easy gig because it's such a short. Like they do, I don't know back then, but now they just do like Christmas time. So it's like, they do a month of Christmas around the world, and
it started out easy. It started out with it was about a month or a little under a month. But then over the years it would turn into 2 months. And then with rehearsal, there were a couple tours I did where it went past New Year's. Started in October for rehearsal. Like there's no way I could do it now because of with just Testament schedule alone. Right. I need that. But then with all the other stuff I'm doing, it just got to be too much. But it was fun to do for a while, and it all sort of the nucleus of all that was Sabotage, which was really, really strange.
No, yeah, that whole story is crazy. Did you who was singing at the time? I know they've had a lot of different singers.
Stevens.
Okay.
Who was the guy? He after Relieva sort of semi-retired. It was Zach was the guy that took over.
Right. Okay. No, I mean, like, I know they had a lot of guest vocalists on those Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about Sabotage.
No, yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Trans-Siberian had many different singers. I mean, every song was sung by somebody else.
Right.
And there were singers in and out of the band, and some rock singers, some more theatrical singers.
Cool. I mean,
one of them, who's a really good friend of mine that I'd been working with in another project, Adrienne Warren. She's a big star on Broadway now, playing Tina Turner.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
That's big shoes to fill. Jesus.
Oh yeah, she does it too.
Wow. So like the Alex Skolnick Trio, that was something that came from your love of jazz. So when did your love of jazz start? I remember actually reading a Guitar World interview with you. I think when you were still in Testament in the 80s, where you talked, or maybe early 90s, where you talked about your love of jazz and how you'd been sort of self-studying jazz stuff, when you could. Where did the jazz thing come from?
It was just a natural development. I mean, I think after that first time hearing Eruption, I hadn't been knocked out by any musical experience until I started opening up to more jazz-based musicians.
Huh.
It started with a concert on TV by Miles Davis doing electric music. So he had these bands in the 80s where it was really more rock. I mean these were all respected jazz musicians, but they would go places where it was just screaming guitars and just high energy. So I didn't even think of it as jazz at the time. But then the more as I learned about it, I found out there's no way you will ever be able to play like any of these guys unless you get a foundation in jazz. So I started getting more into electric jazz, Al Di Meola, Mahavishnu Orchestra, stuff like that. And then I realized like so many of these guys had come from Miles Davis's band, and I started seeing. I started going to jazz concerts. It became like a little hobby of mine, and I saw John Scofield. I saw McCoy Tyner. I saw Mike. I mean, whenever I wasn't on the road, I was going to hear this music, and it gave me a new challenge. And out of necessity, it was like I was just trying to build this foundation. But then the more I did, the more I really liked traditional jazz guitar.
Cool. It's interesting that I used to work a jazz night at a bar called Bar 4 on 15th Street and 7th Avenue on Sunday nights. And so we, it was a rotating cast of characters that would come through. But it was really my introduction to like watching these jazz guys play. And these guys would play every single night, every night. And like it was all free jazz stuff. And it was and sometimes it was great. Sometimes it was fucking terrible. But like it was like the sort of discipline of having to play jazz is a really interesting discipline to me. Did you find it difficult when you started at first?
It was like playing another instrument.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
It was so different. And it was very strange because, the notes are the same. A, B, it's a B flat.
It's just where you put them.
Well, the use of them. So, and it's how you play them. It is, how you combine them. The touch of the instrument, it's very different. I see somebody's asking about Allan Holdsworth. Yeah, he's another one that Amazing. I got into. And my favorite music of his is with Tony Williams, who had played with Miles Davis. So it's kind of this crazy. Holdsworth is like this link between sort of the British prog rock, because he had played with Bill Bruford and UK, but he'd also played with Tony Williams in this project called Lifetime, which is just insane. And that, to me, that's like the ultimate blend of like jazz and heavy rock. And of course, he had influenced Van Halen. That stuff was a huge influence on Eddie Van Halen. So, suddenly this was getting me excited about developing and guitar, and it was different from what everybody else was doing. And somebody else is saying Mike Stern. Yeah, these are all people that I would go hear live. I would start. I've been able to play their stuff since, but at the time it was like, it was so over my head.
Yeah.
And I realized I needed, again, I said this earlier, I needed this foundation in traditional jazz. And I was also wrestling with it because the same instrument like I'm using to play screaming guitar through a wall of Marshalls, I'm having trouble translating some of these jazz ideas.
Yeah.
So eventually I did this funny thing. I made a deal with myself. I said, I'm going to allow myself an extravagance, instead of a sports car or something, I'm going to buy this great jazz guitar. And that's actually it right there.
Oh, that's it. I was going to say. Cool.
And it's from 1976. It's an L5.
Right.
It's previously owned by this jazz legend in Berkeley, Calvin Keyes. It's same type of guitar Wes Montgomery is playing on
right, of course.
This one note live at the Subo in Berkeley the year I was born. So cool. It's like all this symbol, and I just made a deal with myself. It's like, okay, I have to get the jazz guitar thing together, and otherwise the guitar goes back. And that was really good incentive.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. Like Allan Holdsworth is it's interesting the way you say that he's a bridge type player. Because like being like a huge prog fan, like between Steve Hackett and Steve Howe and John Mclaughlin and all these guys, Allan Holdsworth had, I think, the most unique style. Like he did what when I first was introduced to him, it was called something called outside playing,
right?
Which you can, like, somebody mentioned that Meshuggah was very influenced by Allan Holdsworth, and that's really obvious.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's his influence on modern, especially modern metal, I think is pretty intense. Like for people who wanted to search it out, it's interesting you bring him up in particular. I thank our audience member for bringing him up. But yeah.
Also when he passed away, the people who came out just singing his praises included everybody from Zakk Wylde to Satriani to you name it. I mean, he influenced especially Van Halen, as I mentioned, and I had this huge honor of playing at this gig that he was supposed to play at the Iridium in New York, and they decided to keep the gig, have his band play, and just have 4 different guitar players interpret his stuff, and I was like one of the guitar players, which was totally humbling, and it forced me to really dive into his music. And so I've actually been, and I'd always sort of gotten bits and pieces of it, but I never really dove into it. And it was a great excuse to do that. And it caused me to realize that, yeah, you were saying he's so unique and so different. I think he couldn't not play like that too.
Right.
Yeah, it's not like he had some idea.
He could put out 12 bar blues.
Well, it was just he played like himself, and he was very uncompromising. And it's kind of sad because I think we somebody who was there, Drink to Remember, was there. It's very cool. Thanks. Yeah, it was an amazing night. That was his family was there. Guitar magazines from Japan and Europe. It was kind of a high pressure gig, but it was really cool. It was just a good acknowledgement that, yes, even though I was kind of a weirdo to have this interest in jazz while being in a metal band, it makes sense. It's a side that I continue to develop, but I also the metal side is alive and well, and
well, it's funny either
that's
way.
important too.
I think it's a testament, no pun intended, to how good and diverse of a player you are, that you could be accepted into something like that. I mean, that's fucking cool as shit. I mean, for you, that's got to be amazing. Transitioning into the record I wanted to talk about, Planetary Coalition, which I love that record. I think it's so cool. And it was interesting. I only knew about it because you had your record release at Over the Eight, which Dave used to own when it was open.
Yes, yeah.
And,
that worked out so well. Yeah.
Yeah, super cool. And like, he's like, you got to listen to this record, man. I think you really dig it. I know you like Alex. I'm like, yeah, man, cool. Check it out. And like, I'm really into sort of Eastern music. So like, there's a couple of songs on that record that are really cool with the tambour, and like your playing is almost like a Testament solo early on, but with a tambour and acoustic guitar in the background. It's pretty cool. But can you talk a little bit about like how you got into world music? Like, did that take a lot of studying, or was it really natural? Did you take a lot of, did the people who played on the record influence what you did a lot? Like, how did it work?
Pretty much all of the above. I mean, I think, I've always heard a connection between like the high energy playing, the high energy technical playing, and and world international music. Now, most players that, if you're more into the metal side of things, or even just anybody not familiar with world music might not be aware of how cool some of it is. I think it's a strange category. Yeah, because there's this whole series of albums that get sold like in yoga studios, for example, and it's right.
Yeah,
and it's just like this sort of mellow world percussion, maybe with a drone or a didgeridoo or whatever. But no, the real world music by like really good technical musicians is incredible. I think I first discovered it from some of the musicians I was talking about earlier. So I mentioned John Mclaughlin.
Okay.
Right. So he was basically he'd become like an arena rock act at one point with Mahavishnu, and then pissed off his record label because he decided he wants to do acoustic guitar with this group of virtuosos from India, and that was called Shakti, and he just switched gears, and for a few years in the States, he just said that's it. This is what I'm doing now, and it's amazing music, and so John Mclaughlin with Shakti, and actually Al Di Meola, in between his electric stuff, he did a bunch of world prod. He's like an expert on this Argentinian composer, Astor Piazzolla, and has done albums of Piazzolla with actual world artists. So a lot of these guys that I admired from that whole 70s jazz rock period also did mixed world music.
Right.
Chick Corea has these Spanish themed compositions.
Well, I mean, most famously, not jazz musicians, but Paul Simon and Peter Gabriel, obviously, like big time pushed. Peter Gabriel both of those guys probably put that on the map as far as what world music is. You know, it's not as deep as what you were doing, but
that's one, and that's amazing music too. But I see somebody here is mentioning Ravi Shankar. Yeah, Ravi Shankar. I think he in a way he created Shakti, because he worked with the Beatles and just had such an influence in Britain. That's obviously how John Mclaughlin got so inspired to do stuff like that. Ravi Shankar's daughter is Anushka Shankar. She's incredible.
Yeah, I've seen her play before.
I mean, like what the hell? That is amazing, and that's like the current version of that really exciting music. So yeah, I mean, there's just so many examples of that. I see some part-time student of mine they know a guy producing my band's new album worked on Shakti. Oh, that's super cool.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, so I think even if people should check out the Shakti stuff. I mean, it goes into these sort of meditative drones, but then it becomes over the top, high energy, intense, and also all that stuff. And I haven't talked. This is something I haven't talked about a whole lot, but I had a brief marriage that didn't work out too well because my ex, who's a wonderful singer, but she wanted to live in Israel, and I love Israel. I couldn't live there. That's a whole other story.
You can't leave the slope, man. You can't leave the slope. Come on, you're one of our most famous residents, dude.
Yeah. Well, this was before yeah, absolutely. And but I had worked on some music with her because I thought, all right, you know what, I don't do I'm finally getting my footing in jazz guitar, and I know metal inside and out, but like world music, you have to work with players that so and she had this band of some really great players, but I remember there were a couple times in the studio where the guitar player didn't show up. And I said, okay, you know what? I think that's a simple part. I can play it. And then that happened a few times, and to the point where the producer, who was this Israeli guy that pretty much just did like world music and pop, he's like, well, why is this guy not the guitar player on the record? And then so that these musicians with some credibility they seem to think I could do this. And then within a few years, I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned this, the singer I played with, who was like a folk singer.
Yes.
Not my ex, but this other. So her drummer was this Israeli musician, and anyway. So I started like meeting these musicians from other parts of the world in different configurations, and was playing with them, and it was very natural. And so I think this was like the early 2000s. So I think it probably planted a seed at the time. Like, all right, one time I need to do something like this, where it's this kind of groove, except I'll write the music and I'll pick the musicians. And
were you going to them, or were they coming to you, or were you recording remotely? Like
it was a little of both.
Okay.
So being in New York, there's just so many great musicians here. It's I think like half the band I rounded up in New York, and then a few of them played remotely. Some from Europe, some from Latin America. Oh, and I should mention, in between the first seeds being planted way back when, and me doing the record, I had played with Rodrigo y Gabriela,
right,
who became good friends of mine, and we would do these jams live. And I just thought, okay, well, I had played on their record as a favor, so I know they'll play a song. So I suddenly I have this high profile world music act. They just won a Grammy, by the way.
Wow.
And so I knew I could get them. They I did a couple shows with them with this other act, these oud players called Trio Jabon. That they're amazing. And I kind of hit it off with one of those guys, and he said, "Yeah, if you ever do a world music album, I'll play on it." And then it was So I just suddenly I realized, okay, at that point, Testament was off, and we'd been resurrected, and we're going strong. But we just decided to take like a year or so off. I think it was after Dark Roots of Earth.
Okay.
And there was like a year open in the schedule. It's like we'd been touring nonstop. I was okay. I need to do this record now.
Well, it's good. So, kicking the ass,
Yeah. So Rodrigo Gabriel, they did their tracks when they were on tour. They had a day off in New York. They came into the studio, and kind of the core of the band is these guys. They're in a project called House of Waters, and they do tours with Snarky Puppy. I don't know if you know who that is.
Yeah, I know who that is. Yeah.
Yeah. So it ended up being this really cool, fun project. It was a massive undertaking, and I've been so busy ever since I haven't been able to follow it up. But I was
going to say, are you trying to follow it up? I mean, obviously you guys were making the Titans of Creation record, which is awesome, by the way. Like, holy shit! Like after all these years, it's so crazy that you guys can still like bond and put out great records like that. It's amazing. I think it's going to be on a lot of people's best ofs this year.
Oh, cool!
For sure. Thanks. Yeah, it was awesome. When you started leaking tracks, it was obviously it was like kind of just before all this stuff happened, which is
the timing is really, really strange.
It's good, it's great, and it's not. You know what I mean? Like it's like because you got people's attention because they got nothing else going on besides just kind of being bummed out. But it's like you people are sitting in front of computers and screens, so they have the time to listen to it, which is cool. But on the other side, like people are worried about their futures, so obviously it's it takes a second. It takes a back seat to a point, and obviously you can't tour on it.
That's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be a while, but
I'm not sure where I'm supposed to be tonight. I think I'm supposed to be in Texas.
Oh yeah, that's one of the questions we like to ask. You're supposed to be in Texas, okay?
I think I have to check the schedule. I know a few days ago I looked and it was Texas, and I know there were a bunch in Texas.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
This is going to be a long tour. I was excited too because this is with some newer bands.
Oh, cool. Who?
Black Dahlia Murder.
Oh yeah.
And Municipal Waste.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Black Dahlia just had the #4 record in the country.
I know, right?
It's just awesome. Yeah, their guitar player is amazing. He's
great. Yeah, he's phenomenal.
Yeah, I was supposed to go see Yes with him last year. I drag everybody out to see Yes at some point. So
they're supposed to be on tour as well.
Oh, I know. Yeah,
Steve Howe's tech is a friend of mine, Andre Tomalundi from Asheville, and he was just saying the other day, he's supposed to be. I think he's supposed to be in the UK right now, just starting that tour.
We're going to get cut off in 30 seconds, so I wanted to thank you because you only get an hour on Instagram Live.
I know, it's so quick.
It was great talking to you, as always, and thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. Really nice comments, too. I'm sorry I couldn't respond to more.
Yes, hi to everybody. Comments. This was probably
you guys are awesome.
One of the more